Hey guys, tonight we trudge through the grimy alleys of Elizabethan England, not to fight a duel or attend a court mask, but to tackle something far more perilous: laundry day. Imagine yourself standing ankle-deep in muck, the air heavy with chimney soot, dried fish, and the faint whiff of someone else's chamber pot splashing nearby. Not exactly your average candlelit spa retreat. You're bundled up in coarse linen that's seen better weeks, maybe even better rains, and your arms are loaded with a bundle of questionable fabric that's less ready for laundry and more ready for burial. A passing cart clatters by, flinging a spray of horse-scented slush at your shoes. The sky's perpetually gray, but in your nose, it's 50 shades of foul. And here's the best part. You probably wouldn't survive this. Between the freezing water, the caustic soap, and the highly suspect sanitation system, your modern immune system wouldn't stand a chance. Laundry wasn't just a chore, it was a contact sport. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing just how global this sleepy little corner has become. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start your morning, not with coffee. What's coffee? But with a bucket of tepid water and the lingering hope that the weather will cooperate. Elizabethan London doesn't smell clean, but it does smell consistent. Coal smoke, dung, unwashed humanity, and a bit of moldy ale for balance. You walk past stalls, hawking stale pies and questionable eels, then duck through a wooden gate into a narrow yard behind a row of timber-framed houses. The laundry yard is alive with motion linen flaps on lines stretched between leaning beams, and water sloshes from troughs fashioned out of half barrels. A neighbor nods to you while wrestling something that might have once been a shirt, might still be. You find your station. A wooden tub, a board that's less scrubbing surface and more wooden cheese grater, and a weathered paddle. The tub's water has already turned an unholy shade of grayish brown. But who's counting? You top it off with a fresh splash from a nearby cistern, hoping it's not the one shared with the pigs. Historians still argue whether urban households had consistent access to clean water, but you're not waiting for consensus. Clothing in this period is layered and unwieldy, and most of it isn't washed often. The outer garments, your heavy wool kirtles or doublets, are likely brushed, not washed. But the linens beneath, the shirts, smocks, coifs, and ruffs, those are fair game for the washtub. And when we say linen, we mean actual linen flax-based, breathable, and absolutely merciless when it gets wet and heavy. You start with a smock. It's stiff with body oils, yellowed under the arms, and smelling distinctly like a week's worth of hard labor. First, you soak it just long enough to let the grime loosen, not so long it starts growing new things. If you're lucky, you've got a bit of soft soap, made from animal fat and lye, hand-churned in someone's kitchen and left in a crusty pot. It's not perfumed, but it's enthusiastic. You rub it in with both hands, knuckles scraping against stubborn seams, and then start scrubbing. The smell intensifies. Not floral, not fresh. A heady bouquet of old sweat, greasy soap, and damp linen. You'd think it couldn't get worse, but then the wind shifts. And now it smells like someone's dumped vinegar and raw meat into the communal rain barrel. Just another Tuesday. One of the women nearby, Marjorie, maybe adds her personal mix of ash and stale urine to her load. Yes, urine, human urine, known as chamber lye, is prized for its ammonia content and bleaching power. If you're squeamish, look away now. But honestly, by the time it hits the tub, it's the least of your olfactory worries. A goose waddles by, unimpressed. A child yells something about a lost stocking. You lean over the tub, your hands beginning to numb from the cold. Laundry is physical. Your arms ache, your back protests, and your face is damp, not with sweat, but with splashes from the vigorously protesting garments. And yet, this is social time. In a world where homes are dark and cramped, The wash yard is oddly liberating. You trade stories. You whisper gossip about the cooper's apprentice and the new midwife. You laugh when someone drops a sock in the mud and curses like a sailor. The work might be brutal, but the company, surprisingly warm. You wring out the smock, twisting it hard until water drips in a steady stream from the sleeves. Then it's on to the next piece, coarse stockings, a square of cloth that may or may not be undergarments, and a lace-trimmed cap that's seen better days. Above you, the sun tries to peek out through layers of fog and chimney smoke. A faint smell of roasting chestnuts drifts in from the market, street temporary relief from the acidic cloud of soap and steam surrounding your tub. You take a deep breath. Regret it immediately. Still, there's something oddly satisfying about it. Each garment, once yellowed and stiff, is slowly coming back to life, or at least becoming slightly less offensive. A clean smock won't make you royalty, but it might make you marginally more tolerable to sit next to at church. By the time midday bells echo faintly in the distance, your sleeves are soaked, your fingers are pruny, and you've accepted that your back will never be the same. But there's more to do, much more, and trust me, it's about to get even weirder. You glance down at the mess before you. A heap of half-scrubbed laundry threatens to slide back into the sludge below, like it knows what's coming and would rather not. And truly, who could blame it? Time to bring out the heavy artillery. Not that you have bleach or a neat little pod to toss in. No, your Elizabethan laundry kit is a charming mix of whatever was available, whatever someone swore by, and whatever didn't catch fire when mixed together. You reach for a small wooden bowl filled with a chunky, grayish paste. That's your soft soap, rendered from mutton fat and wood ash. Stirred for hours over a smoky fire and left to cool until it solidified into something between lard and glue. It smells faintly of last week's stew and regret. You scoop out a generous dollop and slap it onto a smock stained at the collar. With a bit of water and elbow grease, the paste lathers, sort of. It's not bubbly, exactly. More like creamy doom. Some washerwomen swear by ashes alone, hardwood ashes. To be precise, mixed with water to create a mildly caustic lye solution. A few swear harder, by soaking whites in chamber lye overnight to pull out sweat and yellowing. Chamber lye, in case your memory is kind enough to forget, is not something you buy from a shop. It's donated, collected over days, kept in buckets behind privies. You pinch your nose and try not to imagine the collection process. Next to you, a woman adds rosemary and lavender to her rinse bucket. A little flair, a little flair. She's heard Queen Elizabeth herself used rosewater in her linens. You nod respectfully, even as your own laundry smells like a wet boot full of onions. Then comes the beating. Some prefer a good paddle flat, broad, ideal for slapping wet fabric senseless. Others use a beetle no, not the insect, though that might be preferable. A sort of wooden mallet used to pound the dirt from clothes. You grab your paddle and whack the smock against the scrubbing board with righteous force. The sound is satisfying. The splatter, less so. Your smock, someone's smock, maybe not even yours at this point, is getting cleaner. Slightly, you'll take it. At least it no longer crunches when folded. Progress. You notice the fabric has begun to fray at the seams. That's normal. Elizabethan washing methods are brutal on cloth. Shirts, shifts, and napkins often wear out from washing faster than from actual use. And let's be honest, use is already pushing them to their limits. Historians still argue whether the average working-class family owned more than 2 changes of linen. Some say even 2 is generous. You look down at the bundle beside you and feel an odd sympathy for the smock that may, finally, be retiring. One washerwoman nearby is using a copper basin and a stick to stir garments in scalding hot water over a fire. This method, common in wealthier homes, is reserved for whites-only colored garments, risk fading or, worse, bleeding onto everything else. The smell of boiling lye water hits you in a wave. It's pungent, earthy, and slightly metallic, like someone boiled a goat inside a chimney. Next, you reach for your bucking tub. Bucking is an especially charming part of the laundry process. You place garments inside a tall barrel, layer them with ashes, then pour boiling water over them and let the whole mess steep like a vile tea. The resulting liquid seeps through a small hole in the bottom and is collected for reuse. Some households keep bucking tubs under the stairs. Others leave them outside and let rainwater do the soaking. All of them smell exactly how you'd expect, like hot socks and fireplace soot. Meanwhile, some of the children are playing nearby, completely unfazed by the stench. One of them is dunking a rag doll into a bucket and pretending it's a noble lady being prepared for court. You try to smile. Then you realize your wash paddle is missing. You find it moments later, being used as a hobby horse. You retrieve it with dignity, sort of between loads. You stretch your back and notice your fingers are raw. Soap of the time, whether homemade or store-bought, is high in lye and rough on skin. There's no hand lotion here, unless you count goose fat. And while, yes, goose fat has been used historically as a skin salve, you decide to save that option for true emergencies, like winter or boils. There's a strange, comforting rhythm to the process now. Scrub, rinse, wring, whack, beat, slap, scrub, rinse, wring. You fall into it like a lullaby if lullabies came with tendinitis. You watch one woman expertly fold damp linen into neat, heavy coils and stack them beside her. She adds sprigs of thyme between the folds, keeps the moths away. She says with a wink, and the men, if you're lucky, you laugh. It's the kind of joke that lands differently here, half humor, half practical advice, fully earned through years of grimy toil. Over in the corner, someone has hung a pair of hose from a makeshift line. The breeze catches them just so, and for a moment, they flap like flags at half-mast. You wonder who they belong to. Someone important, someone forgetful, someone who thinks 2 weeks between washes is still fine. You wipe your hands on your apron, which is also dirty, which defeats the purpose. Then again, the apron is more for modesty than cleanliness. You remember how your neighbor once tried bleaching hers with lemon peels and nearly ruined it? Sun bleaching, she'd said. The sun cures all. She now has a patchy, citrus-scented apron and a deep distrust of folk remedies. You lean against a wall and let your eyes close for a moment. The air is still thick, still murky, but you're getting used to it. The stink has layers, and beneath it all, there's something comforting. Not clean, no, but honest. A world where laundry isn't glamorous, but it's shared, and in its own strange way, it's sacred. One last smock to scrub, and then you'll move on to drying. But that, dear sleeper, is a whole new adventure. You hoist the last of the dripping linen from the tub, arms trembling slightly. It's amazing how heavy something becomes when it's soaked through with Elizabethan water, which, let's be honest, is about 80% water and 20% mystery. Your fingers are crinkled, raw at the knuckles, and you smell like a haunted root cellar. But you did it. The washing is done. Now comes drying, which is not simply hanging clothes. No. Drying laundry in the late 1500s is a full-blown logistical operation, a dance between sunlight, soot, and the sudden, traitorous rain. If you're fortunate, and you've somehow timed this to one of London's 4 sunny days, you'll head to the drying green. These are communal patches of grass, often just outside the city walls, where households stake their claim like little linen conquistadors. You unroll your lengths of rope, tug them taut between trees or wooden posts, and begin pinning up your freshly washed garments using what passes for clothespins in this century, split twigs, bone hooks, or just very determined knots. But maybe there's no drying green near you. Maybe your world is all alleys and inner courtyards. So, you get creative, you drape shirts over hedges, hang shifts from windows, and balance stockings on every available rung of the garden ladder. The smell of wet fabric mingles with the scent of damp earth, baked stone, and that one neighbor whose chimney perpetually emits something suspiciously fishy. Of course, this is London. The weather is moody at best, hostile at worst. A soft breeze turns into a gust that flings your coif into the next yard. A sudden sun shower appears out of nowhere. And now your perfectly drying smocks are wetter than when you started. You swear quietly, in a language only washerwomen understand. You retrieve your linen, muttering oaths older than the monarchy, and wring them out for the second time today. Inside, people improvise. You've seen linen strung across fireplaces, hung from rafters, or stretched flat across wooden racks above the hearth, assuming there's room between the hanging herbs, salted meats, and that one suspiciously crunchy string of garlic no one wants to claim. And yes, drying things over the fire does speed things up, unless you forget about them, in which case, congratulations. You've just turned your smock into a crispy, vaguely flammable doily. Some swear by mangling a kind of pressing and smoothing done with heavy rollers or flat stones. It's not common among your neighbors, but a well-off household might send their linen to be professionally mangled for that crisp finish. You run your fingers over your drying smock and wonder if it's worth it. Then you remember the mangle is located 3 streets away and guarded by a woman with no sense of humor and a pet goose. Never mind. As your clothes sway gently on the line, you take a moment to sit. Your bones creak in protest, and your apron gives off a faint, fermented pong as you settle in. You nibble a crust of bread. Because yes, you've earned it. And for a fleeting moment, the scent of cleaner linen drifts by, carried on the wind. Not quite sweet, but certainly not foul. Progress. Around you, drying rituals vary. Some sprinkle their linen with vinegar water to ward off moths. Others dab rosewater on the corners of their finest napkins. A preemptive strike against the funk. You once saw someone wave sage smoke beneath her undergarments before folding them. Drives out spirits, she said, and the itch. Historians still debate how much of this was superstition versus practical hygiene. You, in this moment, don't care. You're more focused on the laundry rope sagging ominously in the middle, threatening to turn your drying day into a muddy tragedy. The breeze shifts. A whiff of coal smoke, horse dung, and someone's freshly dumped night soil wafts over the wall. Classic London. You cough, then laugh. Because honestly, at this point, it's either that or cry. You rise to check the garments. Some are drying faster than others. Wool, which isn't washed often anyway, takes an age to dry. Linen, mercifully, is quicker. You run your hand over a shift cool. Damp, but no longer wet. You give it a good shake to drive out any lingering insects or, heaven forbid, neighborhood pigeons. One particularly unlucky smock has caught a blob of chimney soot. You sigh. Maybe it'll come out next week. Children dart past you playing some sort of screaming tag. One of them kicks over your rinse bucket and keeps running. You stare at the puddle, then at the child, then back at the puddle. Your soul briefly leaves your body. You notice, too, the uninvited guests on your drying lines. Flies, always the flies, drawn to dampness, movement, and the sheer spite of it all. You wave them off, ineffectively. Then consider draping a net over the line. Not that you own a net, but the thought is comforting. The sun is dipping now. Your drying smocks are stiffening slightly in the evening chill. You begin the folding process, slow, careful, a kind of reverent origami. Every crease matters. Every corner neatly tucked. A poorly folded coif leads to wrinkled misery. And in a world without irons for the poor, wrinkles are a life sentence. There's a gentle rhythm to it. Fold, smooth, stack, fold, smooth, stack. One neighbor folds while humming a psalm. Another counts aloud. You find your own rhythm, counting the stitches, maybe, or just matching the lines in the weave. A few women pat their folded laundry with flat boards to help compress it. Others stack their piles between wooden plates and sit on them. You think about joining in, but your back protests at the idea. You gently pat your own stack instead, whispering a small prayer to the linen gods that nothing spills on it before it's stored. As the last of the daylight fades, you gather your bundles, careful not to drop a single sock. They may look humble, but each piece of linen represents hours of labor, days of wages, and a whole week's worth of social tolerability. Clean clothes aren't just about hygiene. They're your armor, your status, your entry pass to public decency. You press the bundle against your chest. It smells earthy, soapy, slightly smoky, but it's not offensive. It's honest. It's lived in. And compared to this morning, it's glorious. Tomorrow, you'll starch and store. But tonight, you go home, not triumphant, but slightly less pungent. You wake with stiff arms and the kind of shoulder ache that only a day spent hauling wet linen can summon. Your hands smell faintly of lye and lavender, or maybe that's just wishful thinking. Today is starching day. Not glamorous, not thrilling, but crucial, because clean clothes may be respectable, but stiff, clean clothes. Now, that's real prestige. You rummage through your corner storage bin, fingers brushing over dry linen, folded tight from yesterday's labors. The air inside your house is cooler today. the kind of chill that sticks to the edges of window panes. You stoke the hearth with last night's embers, coaxing the fire back to life with a little breath and a prayer that your neighbor hasn't stolen the good kindling again. The starching process begins not with linen, but with wheat, or sometimes bran, if you're less fortunate. You boil the starch base in water until it turns thick, gluey, like porridge that's gone a bit feral. The smell isn't unpleasant at first. It's bready, even warm, with just a faint suggestion of something unsettling. A little too much heat and it begins to burn, filling your cottage with a sour note that lingers for days. You stir carefully, elbow deep in this medieval pudding, until it reaches just the right consistency. Now comes the application. You dip collars, cuffs, ruffs, especially ruffs, into the warm starch one at a time, letting the mixture soak in before smoothing them over your work table. Some folks use brushes to coat their linens, others just squish it through with bare hands. Either way, it's a messy affair. By the end, your fingers are slick with paste, and everything smells like a bakery that's also a glue factory. Historians still argue whether Elizabethan starch recipes were standardized or passed down in chaotic family code. Some include alay, others swear by vinegar. You once heard someone add crushed eggshells for texture, though no one could explain what that actually accomplished. You stick to the basics, trusting your nose to tell you if the starch has gone wrong. Spoiled starch, after all, is a danger not just to fabric, but to nostrils everywhere. Now comes the drying again, not just drying, shaping. You drape your freshly starched linens over wooden molds if you're lucky enough to have them. For your ruff, you wrap it around a padded form, pinning each pleat into place with little bone pins passed down from your aunts. You mutter apologies to your fingers every time one of the pins rebels, and then you wait. This is not fast work. You sit, watching your collar firm up like bread crust. You fan the edges occasionally, coaxing a curve into the pleats. Your neighbor stops by to chat, and for a solid 15 minutes. The topic is starch, specifically, whose husband ruined whose best ruff by resting his sweaty head on it during Vespers. You nod in sympathy. That sort of thing is grounds for annulment. Surely, later in the day, it's time for pressing. Now, don't get excited. This isn't the smooth, steam-powered elegance of later centuries. No hot irons for you. If you have one, it's a flat chunk of iron that's been heated in the fire and wrapped in cloth to avoid scorching. But most rely on boards, rolling pins, or just the pressure of heavy books if they're lucky enough to own any. You layer your linen between clean cloths, then place it under something flat and heavy. Some women use the legs of their beds, lifting one corner and stuffing the bundle beneath. Others sit on it. A few entrepreneurial types have acquired screw presses, passed down or built from cider-making kits. But you've got a stack of bricks, a stool, and your own weight. And that'll do. Once pressed, your ruff is ready for finishing. The truly daring among your circle will tint theirs slightly saffron for a golden hue, indigo for nobility. But colors are expensive, and besides, the starch tends to mute everything into a vaguely tired cream. You settle for whiteness, or as close to white as one can get in a city where even the air has a color. With the ruff dry and stiff as a philosophical treatise. It's time to curl. This is the high art. You take a stick called a goffering stick, if you're fancy, and begin shaping each pleat into a crisp, perfect wave. Some women heat their sticks slightly, using candle flames and quick turns of the wrist. Others do it cold, trusting only skill and repetition. You try both. One side of your ruff now looks like a royal pastry. The other looks like a boiled squid. You sigh. The candle flickers ominously and nearly sets a sleeve alight. You blow it out with exaggerated force. Maybe squid is in this year. As you finish curling, the scent of cooked starch fills the room. You stand back and admire your handiwork. Is it perfect? Not quite, but it holds its shape, doesn't sag, and smells mostly inoffensive. That's a win. You store your finished ruff carefully, nestled in cloth, perched atop your best chemise to avoid wrinkles. You whisper a warning to the household. If anyone touches this before Sunday, they will meet the ghost of my grandmother. Your hands are sticky, your back aches, and your right thumbnail is now permanently dented from all the pinning. But your linen stands proud, stiff, and ready for inspection by neighbors, priests, and possibly Queen Elizabeth herself if she decides to drop by, which she won't. But still, you glance at the leftover starch, just enough to coat tomorrow's cuffs. You scrape it into a pot, cover it with a damp cloth, and whisper a hope that it won't ferment overnight. Last time, you forgot, and it developed a life of its own. You still have nightmares about the bubbling. Before bed, you stretch your arms overhead, joints popping like firewood. Outside, someone's rooster crows confusedly either a midnight rebel or just very bad at his job. You laugh, not loudly, just enough for the starch pot to hear and know who's boss. Morning again. The air is damp, curling slightly at the edges. The kind of moisture that clings to your elbows and makes you wonder if it's fog or just the city breathing on you. You reach for your linen chest with fingers still sore from yesterday's starching. Today isn't about laundry or drying or even pinning. No. Today is storage day, and that, in Elizabethan England, is its own strange science. You lift the lid of the chest slowly. Inside, the folded linens you worked so hard on rest in neat stacks, each piece a monument to patience and vinegar. You can almost hear them whispering, "Please don't ruin us now." The first job is to ensure they're fully dry. One drop of hidden moisture and the whole stack might fester into mildew. And you know, the smell. It's like a swamp's armpit. You take each piece out, carefully unfolding, holding it up to the light. It's a dull morning, gray and slanted, so the light isn't great, but you do your best. You give each item a good sniff. Not glamorous, but essential. If it smells of starch and smoke, you're in the clear. If it smells vaguely alive, back to the hearth it goes. Once the linens pass inspection, you begin the layering. Storage isn't just stacking, it's a ritual. You sprinkle dried herbs between layers. Rosemary, if you've got it. Lavender, if you're blessed. Wormwood, if you're feeling particularly aggressive about moths. Some even use dried orange peels, although you've heard that invites mice with a citrus craving. One woman you knew swore by sprinkling crushed peppercorns in her sock pile. Her linen smelled like stew, but it never had weevils. You run your hands over the coarse weave of a smock, smoothing it gently before placing it at the bottom of the pile. Night shifts go on one side, Sunday best on the other. Your lone embroidered handkerchief, gifted by someone who once fancied you, sits atop the whole arrangement like a crown jewel. Never used, of course. You'd rather sneeze into your elbow than risk staining it. Now comes wrapping. Some households store linens in cloth bags or wrap them in older, worn linens for protection. You opt for your storage wrap, recycled from a stained apron, but still sturdy. The idea is to shield your good clothes from dust, soot, and the wandering hands of children who think roughs are toys. As you tie the last knot, you hear a familiar sound, the scratching of mice in the wall. You freeze. Mice are the sworn enemies of linen. Their teeth can chew through folded chemises like butter, and worse, they leave behind little calling cards. You eye the floor suspiciously, then fetch a pinch of ash and sprinkle it around the base of your chest. A neighbor swears it works. Historians still argue whether that method actually deterred rodents or just made your laundry vaguely funereal. Some women use cedar, though that's rare this far into the city. You settle for noise. You place a clinking spoon atop the chest lid. If it falls in the night, you'll know something's nosing around. With the main chest packed, you move to the smaller box near your cot. That's where you store underthings less starched, more frequently used, but still worth the effort. You fold these more loosely. They're softer, after all, less likely to crack if folded wrong. A few still bear faint stains, berry juice, maybe, or chimney ash. You'd need full sunlight and a week's patience to bleach those out. And right now, both are in short supply, one by one. The linens disappear into their hiding places. You feel a small satisfaction with each one tucked away, as though you're putting children to bed. Fragile, high-maintenance children that need to be kept away from smoke, fire, weather, vermin, mold, and approximately 75% of your own household. The house grows quieter. The hearth crackles. Somewhere outside, a cart rumbles by on the cobbles, the wheels hitting a puddle with a soft squelch. You glance at your neighbor's window and catch a flicker of motion, someone airing out a smock, holding it like a flag of peace against the gray morning. You settle onto your stool, letting your knees creak their complaint. Your linen is packed, preserved, protected. Tomorrow, it will be worn again, stained again, maybe torn, maybe patched with a scrap from another garment, already frayed. And yet, for now, it feels like a small triumph. In a world where mud lives in your street, where the river stinks in summer, where even Queen Elizabeth herself powders her hair to mask the scent of not quite cleanliness, your linen smells almost pleasant, like rosemary and soap, like a future free from laundry, at least for a couple of days. You let your hands rest in your lap, still dusted with starch crumbs and the faint outline of your last fold. You consider, for a moment, adding another layer of herbs to the storage chest, a double barrier. But then you remember last time, when the lavender soaked up all the moisture and your collar ended up smelling like moldy perfume. Enough. You've done what you could. You close the chest. It creaks slightly, protesting the effort, then settles with a gentle thud. You press your palm against it and smile. The laundry is safe, for now. There's a certain thrill, however modest, in putting on freshly laundered linen. Today, the thrill is all yours. You're dressing for a visit to town, which means unearthing one of your good smocks, maybe even the ruff that survived the great candle incident of last spring. You lift the lid of your storage chest with the ceremony it deserves, and there it is, crisp, pale, faintly infused with lavender, and whatever it was, your neighbor claimed kept moths away. Possibly basil, possibly just crushed hope. You dress slowly. There's an art to layering linen under wool and stays, and more linen again. Your chemise slips over your head, the fabric cool against your back. You pause to appreciate how it doesn't reek of smoke or last week's onions. That's a small, rare luxury. As you tie your sleeves, you're aware of another layer of the laundry ritual: social display. Elizabethan clothing, after all, isn't just function, it's your billboard. Clean linen means respectability, effort, sometimes even virtue. Dirty linen, on the other hand, scandalous. Even if everyone's armpits smell like stewed turnips most of the time, they'll still gossip about the neighbor whose cuffs went gray. Historians still argue whether cleanliness in the Elizabethan era was truly moralized or merely aesthetic. But let's be honest, you know what people whisper in the market stalls: clean collar, clean conscience. And if someone's smock is suspiciously yellowed around the neck, well, best not let them hold your baby. You lace up your bodice and gently position your ruff. It's a little off-center, but you're not about to undo all that starching to shift it half an inch. You pat it into place, pin your cap just so, and head out the door. The air is thick and city sour. Smoke from hearth fires curls down alleyways, mingling with the ever-present scent of damp leather and horse. You lift your chin a little. Today, at least, your linen smells better than the streets. As you make your way through town, your linen begins its slow betrayal. That perfect stiffness from yesterday's starch starts to relax, each pleat of your ruff sagging like a disappointed eyebrow. You catch your reflection in a shop window and try not to grimace. It's not ruined, just tired. Like you after hauling a wet sheet up 3 flights of rickety stairs. You stop by the apothecary, where the scent of drying herbs nearly masks the fishmonger 2 stalls down. The apothecary woman eyes your cuffs approvingly, then casually mentions a new powder she's selling to prevent yellowing. You know better than to ask what's in it. Probably chalk, possibly powdered bones. Maybe something that once lived in the Thames. You buy it anyway. Next, it's the tailor's stall. He's surrounded by bolts of new wool, all smelling like sheep who are almost housebroken. You casually rest your elbow on a pile of flannel and feel your clean smock absorb the scent like gossip. You lift your arm and sniff. Yep, you'll need to rewash tomorrow. As you continue your rounds, you notice it's not just you performing the ritual of laundry as status. Everywhere you look, people are preening, gentlewomen with sleeves stiff enough to slice cheese, apprentices with suspiciously fresh collars, clearly borrowed. Even the butcher has somehow managed a crisp apron, though you suspect it's just stiff with blood. You pass a cluster of washerwomen gossiping under a crooked sign. They laugh as they fold steaming linens straight from a wooden tub. One of them catches your eye and nods knowingly, her way of saying, "You and I both know the starch never holds." Back home at last. You peel off your outer garments. Your once proud linen is limp and vaguely peppered with invisible city grit. You sigh, but you also smile, because you know exactly how to fix it. Before dinner, you soak a handful of rosemary and sage in hot water. The aroma fills the cottage. seeping into the corners. You dunk the smock sleeves briefly, just enough to freshen them. You'll press them in the morning, using the flat stone under your bed if your usual pressing weight is still holding the door open. Laundry, you realize, is never really finished. It's more like spinning plates. You wash, you starch, you fold, you wear, and the moment you sit down, something spills on your sleeve. Still, there's something grounding about it. Clean linen, even just a whiff of it, connects you to the rhythm of the week. Sunday whites, midweek washes, end-of-week patch jobs. And if your cuffs sagged by dusk, that just means you lived through another day without falling in a puddle or getting slapped with a pickled eel. You hang your smock by the hearth to dry and pour a bit of that chalky powder into your wash basin for tomorrow. It clumps weirdly in the corners. You poke it with a spoon. It doesn't move. Suspicious. You'll probably use it anyway. Evening settles like a velvet curtain, and with it comes the quieter work of laundry day. Mending, you sit by the flickering light of a tallow candle, a small pair of scissors in one hand, a needle and thread in the other, and your eyes fixed on the worn edges of yesterday's smock. The fabric is thin, the weave already loosened in places, and the stitches you make now will determine whether the linen survives until next week or tears in the middle of the market. Mending in the Elizabethan household is as much an art as a chore. You run your fingers over the ragged seam, feeling the texture, deciding where a patch might hide the hole without calling attention to itself. You choose a scrap of fabric usually left over from a previous project or a garment too damaged to wear and carefully trim it to fit. Then, thread by thread, you stitch it in place, taking care to mimic the original weave as much as possible. Historians still argue whether patching was viewed as a sign of thrift or poverty, or something in between. Some scholars suggest that well-mended clothes indicated prudence and care, while others point out that tattered rags could brand a person as poor or negligent. But for you, it's just part of the rhythm. Every hole, a tiny reminder of yesterday's bustle, and every stitch, a promise of tomorrow. Your needle catches the candle's glow, casting soft shadows on the linen. You chuckle quietly, remembering an old saying you once heard, better a patched smock than a shiny soul. It's probably nonsense, but it makes you feel better about the uneven stitching. As your fingers work, the room fills with the faint smell of beeswax from your candle, and the lingering scent of dried herbs tucked into your linen chest. It's a curious blend, comforting, even cozy. The silence is punctuated only by the occasional pop and hiss from the hearth, a gentle reminder that the fire is still alive. Even as the day winds down, mending also means considering the small details, the buttons, the ties, the laces. You find a missing button in your sewing basket, smooth and cool against your palm, and sew it onto the cuff with a deliberate slowness. Buttons were precious. After all, made from bone, wood, or sometimes glass, they were kept safe, like little jewels. And then there are the invisible mends, those careful stitches that no one is meant to notice. You smile to yourself as you make one such repair. It's like a secret between you and the linen, a whisper of care passed down through hands and years. But sometimes mending reveals surprises. You find a small hole in the sleeve that you swear wasn't there yesterday. Perhaps the result of a particularly enthusiastic chicken or a stray thorn from the garden. Or maybe a mouse after all. You remember the ash sprinkled around your chest, was it enough? You set the smock aside and reach for the next garment, a pair of underbreeches with a patch already on one knee. You inspect the old patch carefully, noting how it has softened with wear. Mending is cumulative, like layering memories onto fabric. Outside, a soft wind brushes the eaves, rattling a loose tile. You pause and glance toward the window. The street is quiet now, except for the occasional clatter of a late cart or the distant barking of a dog. You return your attention to the linen, sewing as the candle burns low. The night deepens, and you imagine the linens resting safely in their chests, awaiting the next cycle of wash and wear. There's something oddly soothing about this quiet work. Each stitch a meditation, each patch a small victory. As you finish the last seam, you lean back and stretch your fingers, feeling the satisfying tiredness of a day well spent. You stand and carefully hang the mended garments on a line near the hearth, where they'll dry overnight in the warm smoke. It's an old trick to preserve them from moths and mildew. The scent is a little smoky, a little sweet, and altogether familiar. tomorrow, you'll start again. The cycle never truly ends. But for now, the linen is safe, patched, and ready for another day. The night deepens, and you find yourself settling into a quiet corner of the kitchen, where the low glow of embers in the hearth paints flickering shadows on the walls. This is the time when laundry work becomes less about action and more about reflection, about those little domestic rituals that shape everyday life in Elizabethan England. Tonight, you ponder the curious smells that once filled the laundry room, that invisible atmosphere of wet linen and sour starch that clings to memory. You can almost smell it now, the faint tinge of urine used as a cleaning agent, a practice you've never quite warmed to. Yes, in the absence of modern bleach, laundry women sometimes used stale urine, letting it ferment in large pots before adding it to wash water. It was pungent, yes, but effective at brightening whites. This, of course, leads to your favorite bedtime fact. Urine was such a valuable commodity for laundry that collectors roamed the streets with large jars, known as piss pots, to gather it from the public. You wrinkle your nose, but can't help but smile at the practicality. In a world without supermarkets selling bleach and detergent, necessity breeds some pretty surprising habits. Historians still argue whether the benefits of urine bleaching outweighed the social stigma. But for laundry day, the smell was just part of the ambiance, like a disagreeable but familiar song. Your thoughts drift to the tools of the trade. The washboard, wooden and grooved, thumped rhythmically as women scrubbed their linens, the sound echoing down alleys and courtyards. Sometimes they'd add crushed soapwort, a plant that created gentle suds without stripping fabric fibers. You can almost hear the slap, slap, slap of laundry beating, mingling with distant chatter and the occasional bird's call. And then there's the starch, a concoction of wheat or rice flour, boiled until it thickened into a gluey paste. Applying it to collars and ruffs made them stiff and crisp, a visual statement of status and cleanliness. But starching was a delicate business. Too much, and the linen would crack and crumble. Too little, and the ruff would droop sadly, like a wilted flower. You recall how, during starching, the laundry women sometimes added fragrant herbs to mask the harsher smells. Lavender was the favorite, but rosemary, thyme, and even rose petals found their way into the mix. The scent was a subtle rebellion against the odors of the city, the smoke, the river, the livestock. As the fire crackles low, you consider the social aspect of laundry day. It was a communal affair, a chance for women to gather, gossip, share news, and pass down tips. Laundry day was, in a way, the medieval equivalent of a modern coffee chat, minus the espresso and with a lot more scrubbing. You imagine the stories exchanged over tubs of steaming water, the laughs and sighs mingling with the rising steam. The chores were hard, but companionship lightened the burden. You take a slow breath and let your thoughts drift to the practical side again. Drying, indoors. Drying was a careful art linen, hung near the fire to speed evaporation but never too close, lest it catch fire or yellow. Outside, the sun and wind were allies, but the ever-present city smoke threatened to stain fresh laundry gray. Sometimes, laundry hung for days. Depending on the weather, damp clothes could mildew, creating that unmistakable sour tang that ruined even the best starching. As your eyelids grow heavy, you muse about the parallels between Elizabethan laundry day and your own nightly routines, the careful rituals, the repetitive actions, the quiet moments of stillness amidst the bustle. It's a comforting thought. Across centuries, people have found peace in the mundane and in the small victories of a clean collar or a patched sleeve. You lean back, eyes closing, the scent of dried herbs lingering faintly in your mind, a gentle invitation to rest. As the night deepens further, your thoughts wander toward the curious accessories and implements that accompanied Elizabethan laundry routines, tools both practical and peculiar that you might never guess played a role in keeping linen fresh. One such item is the infamous posnet, a small pot used for boiling water over the fire. Simple enough, yet indispensable. Without the ability to heat water, no washing, no starching, no bleaching could happen. You picture the daily ritual of fetching water from the well, balancing the heavy posnet on your arm, and hauling it back through narrow cobbled streets or over muddy yards. It's no small task. And then there's the constant battle to keep the water hot enough without boiling away all the liquid or burning the bottom of the pot, a problem that has vexed laundresses for generations. But here's the quirkier part. Some households kept whiting on hand a fine chalk powder used not only to brighten linen, but also to fix stains after washing. The powder could be rubbed directly onto fabric, left to sit, and then brushed off to reveal cleaner, whiter cloth beneath. The practice was as satisfying as it was mysterious, like a secret weapon in the laundry arsenal. Historians still argue whether whiting was widely used in common households or reserved for wealthier families. You suspect it's somewhere in the middle. Whatever the case, you imagine how satisfying it must have been to see your linens gleam just a bit brighter after a sprinkle of chalk and some patient brushing. You also think about the great wooden tubs that served as laundry basins. Sturdy and often lined with iron hoops, they held the precious water for soaking and washing. Moving these heavy tubs was a workout all on its own. And you've heard tales of laundresses who sustained bruises and scrapes simply from the day's labor. Sometimes, the tubs were shared communally, placed in alleys or courtyards, turning laundry day into a lively, if smelly, social event. You chuckle softly, imagining a line of women, scrubbing away, sharing gossip, and maybe passing the occasional jug of ale to lighten the mood. A more surprising tool was the fuller's earth, a clay-like substance used to cleanse woolens by absorbing grease and dirt. While mostly used in textile workshops, some resourceful households adapted it for tough stains on their everyday clothes. It's funny to think that centuries before dry cleaning, people had their own natural detergents. Even if the process was messier and less fragrant, you glance toward the drying racks. These were often made of simple wood, with arms that could fold in and out, saving space when not in use. Sometimes laundry was draped over bushes or fences, though this was discouraged, lest curious neighbors judge your choice of airing spots. And of course, the ever-present threat of weather changes meant that drying linen was never guaranteed. A sudden rain could undo hours of work, leaving everything damp and heavy again. No wonder laundry was such a commitment. As you lay back, the sounds of the night outside a distant owl, the rustle of leaves mix with your memories of the day's scrubbing and mending. There's a peaceful rhythm here, a continuity across time and toil. In the quiet, you feel the weight of centuries of hands, busy and careful, all shaping this simple but vital daily ritual. You breathe in deeply one last time, the faint scent of lavender from your linen chest wrapping around you like a soft blanket. Tomorrow, the cycle will start anew, but for now, the laundry waits, and you rest. You drift gently into the final moments of your Elizabethan laundry day, where the work may be done, but the thoughts linger on the intimate connections between fabric, family, and time. You picture the linens carefully folded and stored in wooden chests, layered with fragrant herbs, lavender, rosemary, perhaps a sprig of mint to keep moths at bay. The scent is subtle but persistent, a quiet reminder of care and comfort in a world far less sterile than your own. In these quiet moments, you reflect on how laundry day was more than just cleanliness. It was a ritual that held the household together, from the youngest child's patched smock to the Lord's finely starched ruff. Each piece told a story of daily life, status, and survival. The cycle of washing, drying, mending, and storing was a rhythm that echoed the heartbeat of Elizabethan society itself. You recall the many debates among historians about just how much the wealthy and poor differed in their laundry practices. Some argue that even the poorest tried to keep their clothes as clean as possible, while others believe dirt and wear marked social divides more sharply than any garment ever could. But in the soft glow of your candle, those distinctions seem less rigid, just layers of fabric woven with human care. And then there's the peculiar fact that sometimes linens were passed down as precious heirlooms, folded carefully and treasured like family jewels. Imagine that a handkerchief once used by your great-grandmother, now worn thin, but still carrying the faintest scent of her skin and lavender. Such a small piece of cloth, holding centuries of whispered stories. Your fingers trace the imaginary folds, feeling the texture of time itself. Laundry was a daily act of love, a way to nurture not just fabric but family and community. The scent of dried herbs mingles with the last wisp of smoke from the hearth. Outside, the night air is cool and still. Somewhere distant, a dog barks softly, a lullaby for the city. As you prepare to close your eyes, you think back to that peculiar, smoky smell of Elizabethan laundry, the mixture of wet linen, sour starch, herbs, and smoke. It might not be the aroma of a spa, but it's a scent rich with history, resilience, and quiet dignity. You breathe out slowly, feeling the softness of your pillow and the steady rhythm of your heartbeat. The world outside fades, but the stories linger, woven like the threads in a well-mended sleeve. Sleep comes gently now, wrapped in the warmth of centuries past. The night deepens and your breathing slows, each inhale drawing in the gentle calm that Elizabethan homes found amidst their daily chores. You feel the softness of worn linen, the faint fragrance of lavender petals pressed into wooden chests, and the warm glow of hearth fires fading into a gentle hush. Time stretches wide and slow, carrying you softly toward rest. Imagine the subtle rustle of fabric drying by the fire, the quiet murmur of distant voices shared between neighbors, and the faint scent of herbs, a tender lullaby of the past. Your body sinks deeper into comfort, your mind easing away from the bustle of the day, wrapped in the simple, steady rituals of those who came before you. Here, in this quiet moment, the world slows to a gentle rhythm, a timeless pulse of care, resilience, and connection. You are cradled in history's soft embrace, safe and serene. Now, let the images and scents fade, your thoughts growing lighter with each breath. Allow the peacefulness to wash over you, as soft and gentle as the linens of Elizabethan laundry day. Sleep well and wake refreshed.